Hello, my name is Maika. I'm super excited to be here. And this topic is actually pretty timely because we're going through one of the biggest crypto cases in history right now, at least within the United States. We've got all the ETF stuff going on too, and then there's also global conflict happening that's been tied to some sort of crypto funding. It's a very exciting time to be alive. Um, but I mean, this week, to make things even more dramatic, I started reading this book. I'm not sure if you can see this. Number Go Up by Zeke. There's another book on FTX out there that has actually gotten a little bit more attention. I haven't read that one. But this book has been pretty illuminating on the backstory of everything that's happened within the crypto industry and kind of the conniving side of crypto, which gives the crypto industry kind of a bad name at this point right now with regulatory eyes. So it's really fascinating. Kind of wanted to dive into a lot of those things, but back to today's talk, I'm really pumped to dive deeper into some of the things that I had prepared for today. We're kind of living in this moment of inception right now, regulatory decision making, and we're probably going to be alive and long enough to see the repercussions of this new technology and how it ends up affecting kind of the world based on how the decisions are made. So for the time I have with you today, I'm going to dive into some ideas and perspectives around how we can strike the right balance between innovation and security in crypto that both benefits us as builders and operators in the ecosystem, but also providing value to the real world. So a little bit more on timeliness of this topic. If you're active in the ecosystem, which I assume you are, you've probably read a headline or two over the past couple months that have to do with crypto regulation. So each of these three screenshots on this slide in particular, it covers a different category of topic. But if you look at, like, for example, the upper left, Middle East regulatory clarity drives crypto industry growth. I'm calling from California, but we all recognize that crypto is a super global industry. ETH isn't from any state or jurisdiction. It's more of like an internet global thing. So that's one new paradigm that the world is going to start to have to get used to, but each region, again, is making their own crypto laws. So historically, a lot of these crypto companies that ended up being rugs or having shady practices decided to actually post up shop on countries that have more favorable laws, more flexibility, looser regulation, less checks and balances and rules, and so on and so forth. And that brought a lot of wealth actually to the country too, but it also left doors open for things which ultimately led to collapse of what we're seeing today. So luckily or unluckily, countries are getting a bit smarter about taking more care with their regulatory stances for the most part. So with the right regulation, that balances things like openness and innovation for builders. Technology like blockchain can bring a lot of opportunity to the countries. So you're seeing decisions being made favorably or more favorably in places like Hong Kong, Middle East, Japan, and so on. And then if you look in the upper right, this is very like current events kind of topic, and we'll get more into the numbers later, but there's been news lately about crypto being utilized by groups causing harm, right? And then we've heard Lazarus, and we'll get into the numbers of what's actually gone there too. So that's another thing to keep in mind as builders, is that there are real world connections to this technology that we prize and are super excited about that are causing real world harm. And there's a reason why regulators need to be involved. So that as an underlying tone, very briefly, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Maika Isogawa. I'm the CEO of a company called Webacy. We're working on safety around digital assets, and I'll explain a little bit later what that actually means. My background's in computer science and AI. And then prior to starting the company, I was at Microsoft doing cybersecurity with the government. And then I'm more on the innovation security side of things, of the whole regulatory triangle. And so I actually brought in a little bit of help from someone who's absolutely incredible. His name's Michael Mosier. He's an advisor to my company. I could list all of his accolades here, but it would actually just go off the screen. But he's just like the guy to go to if you want to know anything about crypto regulation, anything going on. And so a lot of the views from the regulatory perspective are actually from Michael. So very, very valid and very, very good points. So I'd like to attribute that to him as we go through this. So a little bit of a context on historical hacks. We've heard them all before, but at this point you've heard of the hacks. And again, the ones I listed on this chart, that doesn't even begin to cover the amount of hacks in the space. You can see starting on the left, 2011, Mt. Gox is probably the biggest name hack back then. And then over the years, 2018, 2021, 2022, the Ronin network hack, and so on. And we're still seeing many of them today. We're actually kind of seeing a little bit more, even with all of the security tools we have in place. It's still happening, right? And these are just traditional hacks and draining. It's not taking into account things like stablecoins collapsing or individual phishing hacks on consumers and so on. So the numbers on the left-hand side, this is by millions. 2022 was a pretty bad year. Chainalysis says like 3.8 billion. I think it's actually more than that if you think about what hasn't been found, what hasn't been reported. So it was a pretty bad year. I would say we're doing quote unquote better, but if better is still $1 billion, we're not really doing very well. And so this is kind of the context of where we're sitting at within the hack space. And all this to say, like we as builders in the ecosystem, we may look at regulators as bad or restrictive, but at this point, there's kind of like so much money being stolen from consumers and institutions alike that they have to get involved. So I'll be repeating that point kind of over and over. The second point here, another reason why regulators have to get involved is that it's not just a financial crime. Like the money is being stolen and goes somewhere and then gets used somehow. So it's not good if that money is being used for nefarious activities or to cause harm to others. Lazarus, I'm sure all of you know what it is, but for those who don't, it's one of the bigger names of hacking groups in the space, allegedly tied to North Korea. But over the past couple years, they've been doing quite a bit of activity, and it's kind of ramped up in the recent months. So this number is from September. So I know we're in the middle of October now, but if you think back, in the past 104 days, they were responsible for stealing almost 240 million across different projects. And I'm sure there's more to come. And then again, Hamas has raised a ton of money through crypto. This isn't like a political statement. It's just a fact taken from the internet, but it's not a good thing if the crypto is going towards, or if the assets are going towards funding harm. So again, with regulation, I bet regulators would love to have to not worry about crypto, but this is just so obviously tied to it that they have to do something, and they're trying to figure that out right now. The last piece of context here, I think, is most important to us as builders. So Tornado Cash, you know the history. It launched in 2019. It's mixed a bunch of money. It's a tool for privacy and decentralization, which is something that philosophically I think we can all get behind. As human beings, that we have our right to privacy. But around 30%, probably more, has been tied to illicit actors and illicit activity. So U.S. Department of Treasury ended up blacklisting it in 2022. And we also saw people like developers getting arrested for that. So this is kind of scary because as builders, it's difficult to know if something we build is going to be deemed wrong or illegal by jurisdictions down the road. And that's one big reason to push for regulatory clarity first, but also an opportunity for our ecosystem as builders to guide some of that decision-making by building responsibly from the get-go. So in the projects that you build, like now during this hackathon or later, that's something to actually keep in mind, because we don't want a situation like this where your tools supporting illicit activity, but you also don't want to restrict yourself in terms of innovation. So it's really this balance game that we're playing. So big point I want to dive into, number one, is that regulators have a lot of stuff to do, and we should let them do the other stuff. If you think about regulation, there is no crypto-only set of regulators. So they cover all of TradFi. And crypto is really only a really small piece of that financial stack. To give you a look visually, this is like kind of like you versus the guy she tells you not to worry about. We're a tiny, tiny piece of the overall global markets, 2.5%. So the crypto market is 2.5% of the global greater stock market. So looking at this, we're kind of like this fly in the wall that's causing a lot of problems. And in terms of value and volume, TradFi is actually a lot bigger, and so regulatory people have a lot more to worry about. Second point here, the best way to strike balance between innovation and safety in crypto is to manage risk ourselves as an industry. So the innovators, which is us and all the builders who are watching and building this weekend, we know the technology best. We know the innovation opportunity that is probably still unrealized, but we're also the ones that can envision that predictive future. And we don't want to stump our freedom to achieve that. That's completely understandable as builders. But the regulators would probably love to see that great innovation and so on, but they have to focus on managing the nefarious and bad activity that's going on. So yes, regulation is both to control and to protect. But at the end of the day, regulation is meant to help govern and keep people safe. So when we go into the role of regulation, I talked to a bunch of people that are more on the regulatory side of things, but there is very much common ground about the role of regulation, and the primary job is to spot and manage risk. And regulation is meant to balance cost and benefit, but regulators are naturally going to see risk way more than the opportunity in new technology. They're just wired that way because that's their job. Their primary job, again, is spotting and managing the risk, not building the new tech. That's our job. So we should let regulators be able to focus on the bigger issues, like what's going on in TradFi, by managing the risk ourselves. So if you think about it, like if we had been better as a community from the beginning of putting guardrails and risk mitigation in place, maybe some of these things would have happened, and regulators may have a different opinion of what the space looks like right now. Luckily, it's not too late, and we can start today. Last point I want to make here. So self-risk management by innovators is the key to finding the best balance of innovation and safety. So we have to build the safety, not just rely on regulators, because they're always going to be trailing the cutting edge. So I do want to talk about some companies that are actually working on it, companies that have been doing this without being told to do it so. And like Chainalysis is one of the biggest ones. Love them or hate them, they're creating products and services that are helping the ecosystem mitigate risk and analyze the on-chain data. So now organizations, government, institutions, and so on, they're coming to Chainalysis to help investigate things like cybercrime and other things that are going on. There's other companies like Chainalysis, TRM, Elliptic, and so on, just to name a few of them. And they're not just relying on regulators to help them govern and understand the industry. And on the other hand, other projects should actually be leveraging some of the tools and services that they're building to build security and safety and management from the ground up. It's not about restricting, it's more about keeping your company safe, as well as the people that are using the tools that you've created. I'll also briefly talk about us. So we are working directly on the risk mitigation problem too. The space for a while now has kind of lacked some of the tools and services to help consumers and retail users keep their digital assets safe. So our approach is threefold. We do things in the assessment space, like risk mitigation, real-time monitoring on the monitoring side, and then action-oriented items like emergency evacuation through a panic button, and so on. But we build these tools and services with the consumer in mind, and then also have APIs on the back end to help projects protect their end users as well as their teams. So like in a nutshell, regulators hear more about the risk of censorship resistance and the benefit of the resilience of the tech. So they're going to hear the bad news way more than the good news, because the times people are going to be a victim, that's when they're going to go to the regulators to ask for help. They're not going to the regulators to shill how great crypto is or how much value they got from the ecosystem. They're going to go there when they get hacked for $1 million. And so they're just hearing all of the bad news. And we have to keep that in mind, that it's kind of on us to change the narrative. So takeaway from this whole thing, the road has not been easy, and it's not going to be easy, but the less a government hears about needing to regulate us or get involved to help, the more we're going to be left alone. So I think it's on us to build for a safer Web3. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for the time. Please feel free to get in touch. If your team wants to leverage our risk mitigation tools, my DMs are open. We're building, you're all building. Hope everyone's having a good time.